Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Ball Cap Bible study. This is a hat I got in Huntsville, Alabama, and it is called a Trash Panda, and that's the name of their baseball team. Kind of like we used to have the Red Hawks, and now we have the Dodgers, and we used to call them the 89ers a long time ago. But that's their minor league ball team. It's called Rocket City because of NASA and Redstone Arsenal, and they developed the Saturn V rocket there, and that's their little mascot. He's a raccoon, and they call him a trash panda, and it's the coolest logo mascot you'll ever see. It's neat icon. So I liked it a lot, and I got this at the baseball game. Was very honored to get to go, privileged to the ballpark for a ball game, but it got rained out, and that's why you see this background here because went on vacation, went to see James Taylor. He was sick. It rained on us every day. We did get to do some neat stuff. It was dry, praise the Lord. It was dry on the drive out and the drive back, and it's a full day's ride to Huntsville, Alabama. It's a long way from here to Memphis, and then at Memphis you're only about 2/3 of the way. So anyhow, it was well worth it. Got to see Rachel's sister and brother-in-law, and they're wonderful, wonderful people, and got to meet a bunch of new people. The night I was at the ball game, I got to be in a suite. It was a group of very accomplished folks, graduates from the University of Auburn, and I look nothing like an Auburn graduate. Matter of fact, I had on a Virginia Cavaliers ball cap, and they were giving me a hard time, and that's okay. So we are in the very last part of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say um, that I will not be texting these out. I'll do this one. I'll text this one out to everybody like normally have been doing, but I want you to subscribe. Subscriptions are going up, which is a good thing, but I want you to subscribe because it takes a long time to text, and I'm starting to get some carpal thumb, some repetitive motion pain. I'm just kidding, but it'll be easier for everyone. There are a couple of folks that I will continue to send this to in text. Uh, there's a group text that I didn't set up, but I send to things like that. So subscribe, and every video you say, they say, "Oh, hit that notify button" and all that stuff. I don't care if you hit the notify button, but I think if you subscribe, it will uh, let you know when one comes up. But anyway, you figure it out if you like these. Again, I've turned them all on and made them public, which was kind of amazing because once I did that, the subscriptions shot up, and now about 150 people a week are watching this. So I'll try to improve the production value for everyone. All right, we've been going on over Sermon on the Mount, and I want to um, review just a little bit because when you come back, I mean, we've been inside the verses. We've been breaking them down and looking at them, and but what is that 30,000 foot viewpoint of that perspective? What we've been looking at the trees. I want us to think about the forest for a minute. So the Sermon on the Mount is, and we've talked about this throughout, but definitely at the beginning, but it's a paradigm shift. Jesus is pulling folks over to a more godly perspective, that it's not about you, it's about others. He talked about in chapters 5 and 6 and 7. Chapter 5, the Beatitudes, he talks about our countenance, our motivation, the things that you know we strive for. When you look at how he starts off with the Beatitudes, who would think that the way to be happy is to be poor in spirit and meek and somebody who mourns, and somebody who, you know, is about peace and not dominance or fighting, uh, that have mercy, that seem weak, that kind of thing. So when you look at that, then when you look at, you have heard, but I say, think about what Jesus is saying. Oh yeah, there's a social norm that doesn't make it right. You know, your motivation, what's in your heart. You've heard, but I say, whether it's adultery or murder or all the different things, it's it's about what motivates you, uh, what leads to that. He's speaking a little bit to the temptation, and that's why it sounds so much like. Uh, well, I'll put it the other way. That's why James, the book of James, sounds so much like the Sermon on the Mount. We I call James God's life coaching manual. Well, that all comes from Sermon on the Mount. So Sermon on the Mount, you know, how you're dealing with yourself, how you're dealing with the Lord. Chapter 6 is all the, how to pray, how to tithe, how to fast, how to do all these things in a way that makes it personal and intimate with you and God. You don't do all that stuff to be seen by others and get accolades from man. You do all that to honor God, who then in turn honors you. Jesus, all throughout the New Testament, the Gospels, Jesus speaks out against this theology of prosperity, the health and wealth gospel. That's a false gospel. And, he does that by pointing out the widow and what she gives at the offering uh, court compound. So on and on and on, Jesus is shifting the paradigm, upsetting the apple cart, telling them however this evolved and came to be is not what we intended, we, the Trinity, what God intended. And so, the legalism that crept in, when Jesus had to say, hey, ox in the ditch, we're going to work on Sunday if we have to, or the Sabbath, if we have to. So we're going to look at the very last, we're at the end. And when you look at the Sermon on the Mount, it is a challenge. Jesus is laying down the gauntlet, and he's saying, hey, you choose this or that. It's kind of like the verse at the end of Joshua. Choose right now. Choose this day whom you will serve. Every time we make a choice, I may have said this before, right out of high school, I worked at a car dealership. I was the lot boy, and I would push the cars into the service bays, or, every now and then they let me change the oil, or I'd run for parts, that kind of thing. So there was I thought he was old at the time. He was probably only about 45 or 50, but there was a black gentleman that worked there that did a lot of custodial stuff, and I helped him a lot. And one day, and then come to find out, he's a pastor at a little black church. And so at the time, all the mechanics were listening to Merle Haggard and all these, country, Conway Twitty. I'm dating myself, but that's what they were listening to. And I asked him, because I was starting to enjoy that music, and I asked him, I said, hey, what do you think about secular music? Because I had been recently exposed to the Imperials and some of those, late 70s Christian bands, and when contemporary Christian music was coming around. And he looked at me and he says, well, the way I see it, something is either for God or it's not for God. And that's what Jesus is challenging us with. When you make a decision, is it godly or is it ungodly? Is it the way the world thinks, or is it the way God would have us to think? So he actually ends the Sermon on the Mount with your choice. What are you going to do? How are you going to build your legacy? What is your home like? What is your house founded upon? It's foundational, it's fundamental. That's what he's It's what Jesus is trying to get across. The very foundation of how you live is all wrapped up in the Sermon on the Mount. You know, just where you store up your treasure, on earth or heaven. Where are you investing? Are you investing in earthly things or heavenly things? So he ends. I'm not gonna make the mistake. I'm gonna put on the glasses. Say Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount with a challenge and a choice. There's a decision matrix that everybody has and everybody uses, and some people, make their decisions based on short-term gain, and some people long-term gain. Jesus is saying, make your decision based on an eternal motivation, not temporal, not something that's very minor in the big scheme of things. So listen to this. You've heard this before when we talk about things being foundational. Now he just talked about the false prophets and not everybody who says Lord, Lord. He's going to say, depart from me, I never knew you. All right, here we go. Now he says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts upon them, think about that. He's wrapping up Sermon on the Mount. Everybody who hears, reads, understands, knows the Sermon on the Mount and acts upon them, lives according to these principles, may be compared to a wise man. We could stop right there. Wisdom is in acting upon the words of God. But this wise man built his house upon a rock. Now, what's interesting, Jesus is alluding to himself. He is the rock. He is the chief cornerstone. He is the rock upon which we are broken. When Moses is wandering through the desert and he's told to beat the rock and out comes the living water, the water that helps them live. That's all a picture of Jesus. So Jesus is saying, build your foundation, make me your foundation, build your house upon me. Now, they don't see that at the time. We've got spiritual hindsight. We can look back and we see in a 2020 kind of way. But anyone who acts upon these words that they just heard in the Sermon on the Mount is wise, and they're building their house upon the rock of Jesus. Now, and the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and burst against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded upon the rock. Look, the storms of life are coming. You can't predict them. I mean, you can kind of look forward. You can have some vision casting. You can see things on the horizon, but you don't know when you're going to get that call from the doctor or when whatever's going to happen. And it's going to be very important, your foundation. Are the storms of life going to knock your house down? Are they going to take you out? Or are you built upon the rock? And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act, do you see the contrast? This whole Sermon on the Mount is a contrast. The wide road or the narrow gate. Which one are you going to take? How are you going to build your house? How are you going to do all those kinds of things? Oh my, okay, I locked up for a second. Okay, I hope you got through that. I saw my picture lock up and I didn't know what was going on, so we'll keep going. Because we don't edit these, we just plow right through. Okay. Now look at the contrast. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act upon them will be like a foolish man. So you're either wise or you're a fool. I mean, think about it. That just goes right back to Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So just despising wisdom makes you a fool. Not building your house on the rock of Christ is foolish. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. It is imperative. Jesus can't be making a more important point than he does right here. And think about this. He wraps up the entire Sermon on the Mount with this point. What's your foundation? What is your life built upon? I hope it's built upon the Lord. It doesn't mean you won't make bad decisions, doesn't mean you won't make mistakes, doesn't mean you won't even sin anymore. I'm of everybody that's watching this right now, I'm the worst guy that you will probably ever know that's in ministry. But here we go. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act upon them will be like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. You've heard this before. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and burst against the house, and it fell. It fell. It could not stand. And great was its fall. Great was its fall. Don't build your house upon the rock, upon the Lord, upon his principles, upon his moral law, and you're in for a big, big fall. Now, I will say, may not see it on this earth, but you don't want the eternal fall. I promise you, you do not want what God has waiting for those who do not choose him, who do not build their house upon the rock. So that's how he ends it. Boom. And great fall is how he ends it. The whole Sermon on the Mount is about me or the world, the rock or the sand, that solid thing you can depend upon, or that, just add water. All you engineers, just add water and it becomes this fluid dynamic material that won't hold up anything. So this is key. Now the words turn from red to black, and Matthew's describing this. Remember, Matthew, one of the purposes of his book is to declare the authority of Christ. He's always trying to show Jesus' authority. We've talked about that before. Just go to a concordance or a Bible app and just search on the word authority, see what happens. The result was that when Jesus had finished these words, the multitudes were amazed at his teaching. Amazed. I don't know if you've been around people very long. You know what it takes to amaze people? People just aren't amazed. They're skeptical, they're whatever. But this is different. Jesus, this is new. This is exciting. This is contrary to what the world says and what even religious leaders say. Be careful with religious leaders. Don't worship people that tell you about God. Worship the God they tell you about. Okay. They were amazed at his teaching. Why? For he was teaching them as one having authority, not as their scribes. So you got to understand, back then, and we do it today. You'll hear a sermon and they'll quote Billy Graham, or they'll quote C.S. Lewis or somebody. Well, 2,000 years ago, most of the scribes and the guys that were preaching, the Pharisees and Sanhedrin and all those, their messages would be some reading from the Torah, their scrolls, and then they would say, as Rabbi so and so said, or as somebody of old. So they would quote other rabbis, and that's they really wouldn't try to declare that they had authority. So this was new, and I would never try to claim that I had authority either. But our authority is based on the Word of God, and I don't even feel worthy of this role, of this job, but it's been very obvious that God, gave me this opportunity and wanted me in it. So here I am. All right. Well, I love you. That's the Sermon on the Mount. The world or God, the rock or the sand, the wide path or the narrow gate, on and on and on. The paradox of the Beatitudes. You have heard, but I say. Do you see that? Do you see the decision matrix, the choice, the contrast, the this or that? Jesus is black or white. It's not hard. We complicate it. We try to put in 50 shades of gray or whatever. So choose this day whom you will serve. where are you building your house? What's your legacy going to look like? I think that's the challenge. And remember, there's a reason Jesus speaks like one having authority, because he does.